Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, and in this episode of Sonar Fishing, let's talk grass flats. So breaking down a large expansive grass flat, whether it's has submergent vegetation like we have on a lot of the Tennessee River lakes, or emergent grass. Like down in Florida, one of the most important types of cover and most prevalent types of cover is emergent vegetation. So anything from pencil reeds, arrowhead grass, maiden cane, Kissimmee grass, lily pads, anything that's above the surface is emergent grass. And then, you've got a mixture of both in a lot of different situations. So that type of scenario where you're trying to break down large areas of grass, both submergent and emergent, is very, very overwhelming, especially if you don't do it a lot. And it's very difficult to find those key little sweet spots, because just like, if you were fishing a ledge on the Tennessee River, those, you might have, great looking ledges for miles, but there's this one single area, this small stretch that's holding all the fish. And the same thing rings true with grass fisheries in that type of scenario. So, learning how to break these grass lakes down, these grass flats down, is super important. It's something that I learned through years of fishing in Florida. I'm very, very fortunate that I actually spent so much time down in Florida, because it has helped me really figure out how to find those key areas all across the country whenever I'm fishing, lakes that have a lot of grass, which I would say the majority of the lakes out there somewhere have, some abundance of grass. So anyways, in this video today, I wanted to talk about 3 different techniques that I use to break these large grass flats down. These are techniques that for sure will work. Now, whether or not these are the techniques that are going to help you maximize your success. So like if I'm fishing a tournament, I'm practicing for a tournament, these are the 3 techniques I'm gonna be throwing until I start getting bites, and then I can start slowing down with, say, flipping and pitching, throwing a stick bait, whatever it may be. It may be these 3 techniques that I actually throw, and I'm just a little bit more deliberate and thorough with. But in general, these are the baits that help me find those areas, and then I can kind of slow down and pick things apart. So, and that's kind of like where most people go wrong on grass lakes, is that everything looks good. You go down to Okeechobee, everything looks like it's holding the bass. And it's so difficult not to just slow down and start flipping and pitching and being real deliberate. But really, you have to just keep that trolling motor on high and cover water, because unless you're covering water, you're probably wasting so much time in certain areas. That's, I think, where people struggle the most going down to Florida. They get out there, it all looks good, and they only scratch the surface, in a fishing day, because they fish too slow. So these 3 baits are number 1, going to be super efficient. Number 2, you're able to get a lot of bites. They are fish producing techniques. And number 3, they're just going to help you stay versatile, so you can just keep one rod in your hand while you're making this search. So if you had to slow down a little bit, you can still slow down with these baits. If you need to just fish it, fish on the surface, most of these baits you can fish on the surface. So you only need 3 rods on the deck while you're searching out on these grass flats. And this is all stuff that I've learned over the years. So this is pretty juicy information. All right, so the very first technique that I want to talk about, and actually there's 2 that are very, very similar as far as the type of situation that you throw them in. And I dropped the weight. Hold on one second. All right, I'm back. So 2 of these baits are very, very similar as far as the scenario that you're going to be fishing them in. So I'm just going to kind of introduce both of them together, because the tackle is going to be the same, the way you rig it's going to be the same. It just kind of produces a little bit different results and shows the fish something different. So one of them is a swimming worm like this. This is the Z-Man Turbo Fatties. Okay, take a look at that sucker. I helped design this with Z-Man, and the things that we wanted to accomplish with the swimming worm, because you have other, you know, swimming worms on the market, but none that are quite like this. So this one we wanted to bulk up the body so it's a little bit wider, lots of salt in it so you can actually make really long casts, and it's got a slightly different tail on it. It's actually quite a bit different. Most swimming worms have a cut tail. This is like a little paddle tail that works really, really well with the LazTech. And the main thing that I wanted to accomplish as far as the action and fishability of it was I wanted this bait, even though I've got a 1/2 ounce weight as just the example here, this is not the weight that I would use. I wanted this bait to be able to spit and sputter on the surface, create a lot of action, but be have enough of a you know, freedom of movement on the tail, where if I'm using a 3/16 ounce weight pegged to it, I could pause it and it would flutter all the way down to the bottom. Okay, because a lot of baits, you know, the tail's just so stiff that with a 3/16 ounce weight, which is my favorite size for this technique, it just doesn't, you know, it doesn't have any action falling to the bottom. So Turbo Fatties is awesome, but regardless of the type of swimming worm you choose, and another thing I need to mention is this is made of LazTech, so you're not going to be going through packs upon packs of these baits between, you know, ripping tails off because you're running it through grass or you're getting a lot of bites. A LazTech's going to last pretty much all day, but that is one of the best tools for Florida fishing or any lake that has large shallow grass flats. Okay, I've caught them really good on the Mississippi River, and of course I've also caught them down in places like Toledo Bend. You know, this is a really good bait overall. The other one that pretty much fits the same exact niche, you're going to use the same hook, you're going to use the same weight, the same tackle in general. That is the 5-inch diesel minnows. So this is a, you know, this is a 5-inch swim bait. You know, Z-Man used to have one called the grass kickers. It was designed for fishing in the grass, but honestly, I like the 5-inch diesel minnows more. It's very similar to you know, how you fish the Turbo Fatties, but I think that this produces a lot more vibration. So in situations where the water's a little bit dingier and I'm trying to call fish out of real thick cover, I tend to like to throw the diesel minnows more because that tail really creates you know, some vibration. You can actually feel it as it's running through the water column. And actually that's a really good color for fishing grass down in Florida, especially, you know, that Houdini color, and you know, green pumpkin, watermelon red. Another really good color that I love is called, and Z-Man makes it, is called Hot Snakes. That one is awesome. It's a really good bluegill and perch imitator. But those are the two baits, okay? So what these baits do is they allow you to just make, I mean, incredibly long bomber fan casts on large flats. So imagine you're fishing this large expanse, you know, miles and miles of grass flats on Okeechobee. These baits allow you to make you know, long casts and just keep fan casting and trying to find that zone that the fish are in. And you can reel it at any speed. You can reel it on the surface. They create a lot of commotion on the surface. Or you can slow roll it, you know, down near the bottom or somewhere in between. You can do whatever you want with them. Usually I'm just you know, reeling it right below the surface. That seems to be the best overall action. And so, you know, I'm usually go through the tackle real quick. I'm definitely going to be using braid with this technique fishing around grass. So 50 to 65 pound braid. I usually like to use 50-pound braid for these techniques because I feel like I get much longer casts with 50-pound. I started using the Tactics braid, and the reason for that is it's a 4-carrier braid, and as opposed to like the Seaguar Smackdown, it's not as smooth, but it kind of has this, like, you know, abrasive feel to it. That ropey feel, which I love for casting because it has more of a round shape to it. It's a little bit tighter weave, and you can make real long casts with it, and that kind of abrasive finish on it actually cuts through vegetation really, really well. So like if I'm on a pad field, that stuff will cut right through those pads pretty easily compared to a smoother braid. Smoother braids I like using for, you know, vertical presentation. So if I'm like pitching and flipping in cover and I don't want it to make a sound coming through that grass, that's when I'll use like a smackdown. So 50 or 65 pound braid, Tactics is a really good one. And by the way, all of these products that I'm mentioning, all of them that are available at 44tackle.com, I've created links in the description below this video. And if you use those links to buy these products at 44tackle.com, you get 10% off of your order, and I get a little bit of a kickback to support the channel. So I would really appreciate it if you guys use those links. But yeah, braid is going to be standard with all, or just these two techniques that I mentioned. And then the rod and reel that I like to use a rod that Fitzgerald calls the Okeechobee rod. So I use the Okeechobee rod. It's a 7/6 heavy action, pretty much a flipping stick, but it's a really good rod for horse and fish out of cover, even on the length of a cast. And then after that, I use a pretty high speed gear ratio reel, you know, anywhere between 7.2 to 1 and 8.1 to 1. That's kind of the range that you want. The lower gear ratio is going to give you more torque, so that's something to consider. But the higher speed gear ratio is going to allow you to be more efficient. And I almost forgot, but I already mentioned that I use a 3/16 ounce weight the majority of the time with these, depending on the action I'm trying to get. You know, if I want it to be on the surface only, I might use an 1/8 ounce. Or if I want it to get deeper, you know, sometimes I will go to like a 3/8 ounce. Generally don't go any higher than that. But the hook is also very important for both of these techniques. This right here is the Hayabusa 959. This is the hook that I use the most. If I had to choose one hook to use for, you know, the majority of things that I do, because I'm a heavy cover type fisherman, the 959 is the deal. It's got a real heavy duty, construction. I use it for flipping, anytime I'm using braid, anything like that. So the Hayabusa 959, usually I use a 5/0 for these two baits. Those seem to work. But honestly, with a Laztech, you don't need to go to a real heavy or bigger hook. So I've started to use a 4/0 and it works pretty good. And I think that it comes through the cover a little bit better and just looks better with the bait. So that's something to consider. And these baits, again, you're just covering water with them, making long casts. And one of the things that I need to mention about them is, again, they may not be the bait that you use to pick an area apart or win a tournament on. I've made a ton of money during tournaments on these baits, and so I would not, put it against them to actually be the bait to use. But in this scenario, again, you're just trying to find the fish, find the area that the fish are in. And so a lot of times you may be getting bites that'll clue you in on the area, but a lot of times you'll just get wakes that will clue you in on a good area, because sometimes if the fish aren't in a mood to actually chase the bait very far and actually, blow it out of the water like they do sometimes, they'll follow a bait like the diesel minnows, the 5-inch version, or the turbo fatties. They'll follow it, and that wake will clue you in to, number one, how big the fish might be, and the fact that there is a fish there. So always be aware of those wakes and what's going on behind your bait, or even to the side, because sometimes you'll see, you'll be working this bait straight towards you, and all of a sudden you'll see some reeds move from the side coming at the bait, but it might stop. They may not commit fully, but they want to know what's going on. And so just be very, very aware. So speaking of awareness, while I was picking this up and showing you guys, I forgot to mention that you definitely want to peg your weight to both of the turbo fatties and the diesel minnows. So I use a little rubber T-peg like this, and, you know, just slide it, you know, in between the line and the weight. Let's see if we can get my face out of there. There we go. And then you just trim it off, and that keeps it pegged. But it's really important to keep that bait pegged, because a lot of times, this is one of my favorite ways to catch them, like just all together. It's my favorite way to catch them in the spring, you know, when you're covering these large spawning flats. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll reel it up to an opening in the grass where they might be spawning, and I'll just let it fall into that hole. And so you want to make sure that the weight is pegged to the line. So if you're presented with emergent grass, you know, reeds, Kissimmee grass, lily pads, anything like that, these two swimming baits are going to be big players to help you break down those grass flats. However, if you're facing a situation where you've got more submergent grass, so like, you know, Lake Griffin and the Harris Chain in Florida is a really good example. You've got grass all the way to the center of the lake. A lot of those lakes are like that. You can still fish both of these baits that I just mentioned. I would lean more towards the turbo fatties, because that tends to work a little bit better in open water than the diesel minnows, at least rigged in the fashion I just told you. If you're using a belly weighted swim bait hook, this one would work really well, which I do often. But another presentation that when the water especially is a little bit darker, a little bit dingier, and you've got submergent grass that's, you know, not topped out to the surface, you've got a good amount of space between the surface and where the grass tops out at, you know, the chatterbait is going to be one of your best tools for that scenario. Chatterbait, you know, obviously creates a ton of vibration. It's got a lot of flash, you know, if it's a pretty clear water, and it's just got a lot of really good action. And usually with the grass bite, I'm going to be using a trailer like the diesel minnows. So we'll just put this on there just to do it. There we go. So, you know, that's going to be my pretty standard, you know, submergent grass presentation, you know, for at least just covering water, because it's really efficient. A chatterbait can go through hydrilla and milfoil really good. Also eelgrass really good. So you're not going to be wasting time, you know, picking grass off of this bait very often. You usually can snap the rod tip and get the bait freed up. But a chatterbait's going to be another one, and you can cover a ton of water with it. Again, fan cast, figure out where they're at on these big submergent grass flats. You know, following grass edges is really important with this bait. And usually, you know, if I start catching them on a submergent grass flat in practice, this is going to be the bait that I throw in the tournament too. This is just, you know, a chatterbait is just such a killer and tournament winning bait overall. But the chatterbait is going to be my choice for that submergent grass situation. Now again, it may not turn out to be the key bait for, you know, tournament day or, you know, on any given day. But you're definitely going to get some bites or at least some swipes at it. So once you start getting some bites or some swipes and some misses, then you can start, you know, trying some other stuff. You know, whether that means like slow rolling a turbo fatties through that grass, or fishing, you know, a slower worm presentation, or maybe throwing a swim bait. Whatever it might be, you know, that's up to your, you know, your current situation, what you're looking at. But you know, the chatterbait is going to clue you into whether there's fish in the area or not. As far as the tackle that I use with the chatterbait, and this isn't necessarily the color that I'd use. Usually I'm using either a bluegill imitation or a straight shad imitation, which this would fall into. But so I'm not saying that that's the color you need to be throwing. The tackle I use is going to be either a 3/8 ounce or ½ ounce chatterbait generally. I'm going to be using fluorocarbon. I like to use usually 17 to 20 pound test. Red Label is actually the one that I use a lot of times because it's less expensive, but it's just a really good strong line. And for this presentation, I don't need to worry about like you know, the diameter being super small or anything like that. So Red Label does really do well. The rod that I use is the same rod I use for all my chatterbait fishing, a 7.3 medium heavy Versa series rod from Fitzgerald. And I use the 7.2 to 1 gear ratio VLD 10 or, you know, FX8, whatever bait casting reel that you're using. And that's the tackle. I don't want to use braid with it, you know, because I'm usually fishing a little bit more open water scenarios compared to like the turbo fatties and the diesel minnows. But, you know, I like fluorocarbon. I feel like it gives me a good advantage. You know, it gets me more bites. I don't feel like it's going to straighten out the hook. And it also sinks, which is good. It helps you kind of maintain depth control. Yeah, so anyways, guys, this is, I think that this is like some of the juiciest stuff that I could possibly relate to you guys, because when I moved from California to Florida and started fishing tournaments down there, it took me so long to figure out how to be efficient and to find the good key areas. And really, it was, you know, it was these baits that helped me kind of figure Florida fishing out. I knew that I was really good at, you know, once I found an area, I could go flip them up, and that's how I like to fish. But up until the point of finding the fish, that was kind of the biggest struggle. And I think that that's where a lot of people struggle in grass lakes. I know I mentioned Florida a lot, but I'm talking about all across the country. Up north, you know, there's plenty of great natural lakes that have great grass fishing up north. St. Lawrence River, you know, the Mississippi River in La Crosse, you know, even, you know, Lake Champlain. All those lakes have tons of grass scenarios that these baits are going to help you, you know, find those fish. But anyways, guys, that is my breakdown of my 3 favorite baits that help me find fish on grass flats. I know I did a video just recently about the turbo fatties, but I needed to throw in, you know, the diesel minnows and the chatterbait, because those kind of open things up even more. But anyways, let me know what your thoughts are. Are there any baits that you like to use to cover a lot of water on grass flats? Not just catch fish, but cover water and find fish. Yeah, anyways, thanks for watching. Make sure you like, share, subscribe. I appreciate you guys very much watching these videos, and I'm going to see you out on the water. Take care.